Better.
Testing.
Not touching it again.
No, not yet.
No one's on it.
Laura is. Hey, Laura, can you say something so we know that we can hear you?
I can still hear you.
Okay, on the Zoom, it's pretty soft. I didn't hear. I knew she talked.
Okay,
and I
can you,
heard her.
yeah, go ahead again, Laura.
I can hear you. Sorry, Lisa jumped.
Testing, testing. Laura, can you hear us?
Yes,
Say something again too.
Can you say something again, Laura?
I can hear you.
Okay,
She's still really
She's
quiet.
very
she's
sound.
still pretty quiet from Zoom.
Sorry, Laura. Thank you. You're the only one on Zoom, so.
Sorry.
Oh, there we go.
That's,
Yep,
no,
That's good.
I wasn't saying that to be criticism. I was just, we're trying to figure out how to get the sound all right.
Oh, no. Everybody's awake. Except for now the mics can hear my thoughts. I feel like I'm inside your
okay,
brain.
that's it. So we're gonna need to turn that down.
Turn my mic off or down. I would like to get out of your brain. Scary face. Every time it makes a noise, I'm worried it's gonna screech.
Sit perfectly still.
Don't touch anything. All right, so should we just keep moving?
Let's go. Yep, we can go ahead.
Okay, activity fee policy.
Activity fee policy here. I shared we actually discussed this a little bit. This has been a while back, a solution to the board having to, whenever we had to increase activity fees, just based on, we hadn't raised them in a few years. The budget was starting to get to a point. So the board came to I broached an idea of actually looking at policy that was a set range for coverage, because we talked about how much, theoretically, how much, even per the discussion that we just had, how much should fees cover the tighter cost of facilitating activities for the school district. So we drafted a policy, and it basically states that a percentage of budget activity fees, with the exception of hockey fees, will cover no more than 20% and no less than 18% of the activity's budget. Automatic increase: when the cumulative fee revenue represents 18% of the budget, the district will increase activity fees without further action from the school board, so the fee covers 20% of the activity's budget. There's a family cap that's in there. The district will cap the family activity fee so it does not exceed 5 times the amount of the individual activity fee, which is established by the formula stated in this policy. Individual cap: the school district will cap each individual fee at 2.5 times the individual fee as established by the aforementioned formula. So it's basically just you're approving the policy to state, hey, we know the range, we've agreed on the range to be in that between. So once it hits 18%, we would make a fee adjustment that it goes to 20% again. And that usually, it seems to be that takes care of it for about a 2 to 3 year time period. Just so you know, if you do approve this policy, it will not change the fees coming into the next school year. We're still within the range. We're not yet. I think we're about 19%. And it usually moves up just under 1%. It seems to be tracking that way with regards to every year, because costs do go up, cost of reffing, cost of transportation, those types of things. So this would set into motion that the district would just automatically, per the formula and per the policy, adjust the fees accordingly. And my recommendation is there would be a first read. This is a new policy. It would be a first read tonight, and a second read that would make the policy active in July.
I think the only thing that I struggle with, and I've consistently struggled with it throughout the years, is the caps. Just because it seems like the caps for an individual student is just, it's different. So like for a specific family, if you only have one student in the school district at that given time, taking advantage of activities, you're paying for at least 4 or 5 activities. If you're a larger, I think it's if you benefit like 2 kids or 3 kids, the moment you hit a 3rd kid, I think then you really do get a benefit and can take advantage of that family max, which is great. And so, I don't want to sound overly critical to that, but it does put a huge financial burden on singular families who want to have multi-activity students. So I feel like this gets closer to that, but I think there still is a little bit of a gap. So it's just always been a consistent concern that I've had.
Do we
Yeah.
still have the 3rd sport free thing? We don't do that
No,
anymore?
we did away with that. The 3rd sport would be free. We did away with that about 2 or 3 years ago. And the concern from the board is would that decrease participation? And it
Right,
Mm-hmm.
didn't change anything at all.
that's right, I remember that.
But the family max is a pretty good deal. If you have more than 2 kids, that's a great deal. But if you only have 1 kid, I think we did 4 activities. And we paid for all 4. And that's fine, but
There is I guess it was Dr. Heil, but there is a way that if it is getting too expensive and it's really busting the budget at home, there is a way to apply for help on this too.
Yeah, well, obviously we have a procedure in place that families that are in free and reduced and things like that, those are very much standard practices that we do.
And I just point that out just to make sure people are aware that
Absolutely.
that sort of stuff is available. I know that doesn't fix the problem that you bring up, but. And then we did some analysis on this stuff too, and there are some incredibly good deals in here as well, right? To pay like $185 for like golf season, for God's sake, they get 25 rounds of golf for that price, right? So there are some really sweet deals in here too that one could argue.
Yeah, and I think future conversations are going to be, to the point of, some seasons are twice as long as other seasons. If you look at 1-act play as compared to the basketball season or the hockey season, now you're starting to look at differentiating that. Actually, 1-act play is a pretty costly based on per pupil, how many pupils are actually involved in the activity per what's paid for the coach, what's paid for the transportation, the reffing and all of that, the judging. So it'll probably be further analysis to your point to say, where can we bring some equity into that?
That's fair.
But I think this is it's a good start, because this is something that since I've been superintendent that the board has struggled with, because it's so hard. I mean, to do this, it seems to be, this is a consistent approach where we need to make adjustments based on these parameters, which is pretty straightforward. It takes the argument of how much should we increase it to should we increase it at all, to how long has it been since we increased it, to what are other districts doing. We did market analysis, and I know you guys said, well, that's not always that's their journey and this is our journey, and that's good information, but at least this kind of gives it a pragmatic approach, at least to begin to do something.
Is there a guardrail on how much it would increase year over year? I'm just wondering if it's a % of budget, what's the modulating component that says it'll increase based on the budget, but no more than X% in a year? I get we have family and individual caps, but that still doesn't get into how much is it gonna jump year over year? It sounds like it's only been a %.
Yeah, I mean, it's what would drive the fee increase dollar amount would be to, when we analyze the previous year's budget, we would move it X dollars.
But there isn't a cap on what that X dollars would be.
No.
Right. So if for some reason things completely skyrocketed, this would never happen. But I mean, in theory, they could go up 25-30% in 1 year.
Right. I think if that's the case, I think I would be coming back to you to potentially review the policy.
Exactly.
Fair enough.
Would we want something in there that says, like, if it's more than a 5 or a 10%, then it would come back? Or is
I
that
think-
not something that we want?
I think when we analyzed it, we thought it would have been a reasonable, to move it to a percentage, we're talking about probably $15, somewhere in there. And so when we looked at the historical, when we did change some things and tracked it and looking at the new budget parameters or the percentage parameters, it wasn't that big of an increase.
Have we ever looked at, kind of to Amy's point, just out of curiosity, a true family max, you know, based not necessarily just on the number of children that you have, but your activities? So if you have a kid that wants to be in 4 activities and you've already paid for 3, you know, is our max always just based on the number of kids you have in the program?
Number of sports that they're in.
No,
Well, no, like
Layered
a
in there.
true family max, not just based on the multiple kid rule.
It's just $1.
Oh, it is just a dollar.
It's just a
Dollar
dollar amount.
threshold.
So
Has
if
nothing
you've
to
got,
do with how many.
yeah, so
Oh, okay, then I misunderstood.
like if you have 4 kids, once,
So it is just a dollar.
once you
amount.
hit, what is
Four
it,
kids and only one of
600?
them
No,
is to be
800.
800.
It's 800. So once you hit 800, you're not
That's
paying
what I thought,
anymore.
but I was confused. Okay.
So all 4 kids could go all 5 sport or have 5 activities and you're
Yeah.
only paying for 800.
Right, right. Okay,
But if you only have 1 student, you're paying for all 5.
okay,
There's no way to hit, you're not ever gonna hit the family max.
right.
So anyway, but I just think conceptually, it's a big, in my mind, it's a bigger conversation. And I don't want to negate the positive forward movement that this policy has made because it's taken us a long time to get here. But in light of conversations we've had regarding the levy and the budgets and cuts, when we're making $500,000 in cuts, which are now to people and programs, I think we have to take a look at the activities and how it's structured and how it's, how we're budgeting for it and the expense to revenue. We just owe it to ourselves. If we're gonna continue to increase class sizes and cut staff and whatnot, but yet we keep this kind of over here held harmless. I don't know that that's.
I don't
what we
think that
wanna
would
do.
be the position of the board, is that we would not ever raise that to, I mean, if we're at $1.5 million budget deficit next year, we're
Yep.
definitely gonna be revisiting this policy and
Yep.
looking at
Good.
raising fees, right, or doing something different. I
I
don't
would
see
hope
any
so.
way around that, but I just don't know. I think we would have to look at it, talk about it, figure out what that would look like. But I don't think anyone would say that activity fees are held harmless going forward just because we have this policy in place.
So I have a question then. The family cap and the individual cap in the policy. I thought that was how many fees an individual would pay a year was 2.5 fees. It doesn't sound like that's really it either. So can you explain what that means then?
it's not the number of fees or the number of activities. It's the amount of the individual activity fee or the family fee.
But so if on the individual, the school district will cap each individual fee at 2.5 times the individual fee as established by the formula. So does that mean the fee can only go up 2.5 times in a year?
No.
I'm trying to figure out what that means and if
So
it's not.
so when you move the fee of, based on the percentage, so once it hits 18%. And so let's say for an example, the fee moves from 185 where it currently is. So let's say we fast forward a year or 2 down the road. And now when we did an analysis of our budget, we've hit 18%. So let's say for sake of just discussion, the fee then to get it to 20% would require it to go to 200. So then the cap is, if it's family, the cap would then be, the newly established cap would be 5 times 200.
Got it.
And the individual cap would be 2.5 times the new amount of the individual fee.
Okay.
Good clarification, thanks.
I assume it's never dipped below 18%. Right?
Way below. Yeah, that's why it's in place.
In 1 year,
Well, I'm just saying, it says when the district, it's always an up on the fees. I'm assuming that there's never been a down.
not that I know.
But well, I mean, we've never done this, Sue. We're trying to put this in place, but it got to a point where we didn't raise fees for quite a while. And it was way down under 15% of our budget. So that's why, that was the
Right.
catalyst to this thing. So it might even got lower than that, actually.
Yeah, I think what she's saying is that there isn't probably.
I understand your question. I just
Yeah.
wanted to clarify. That's why we're having the conversation.
Right, makes sense.
Okay. Good discussion. So we'll have first read on this one tonight. Next item is item 3, plan for a possible government shutdown.
So in 2 days, if the legislature and the governor does not come to an agreement on a budget, seems like they are making progress. It means that the government statutorily goes into a shutdown, which means only critical services deemed to be critical. One of the things that is not under a critical service is the people that would help facilitate payments, state aid or federal aid to school districts. So that means that our revenue from state and federal aid would stop come July 1. So whenever we would get a July payment, we wouldn't get that payment. So the question is, we have a very simple solution to it, and we've done this in past. We would just utilize our fund balance on a temporary basis to maintain operations, to maintain payroll, to maintain any of the expenditures that we're obligated to have or make. And that would, we did some analysis, and it would actually be a good couple of months, potentially even into September. So again, this is a real short discussion, may not even come into play, may not happen, but I wanted the board to be aware that we do have a plan. And just because state aid does not come to us, if they do go into shutdown, we will still be able to operate.
This is probably one of the best use cases for why we have the fund balance that we have.
Exactly. I-
Yeah, I mean, I even remember, so this is an extreme situation, right, where we're not getting any payments. I remember back whenever it was 15 years ago, where we were only getting, 70%, 60% at a time. And so,
And we didn't have to, the only alternative is districts that don't have a good fund balance will short-term borrow.
Yeah.
So now you're paying to borrow money in order to make payroll and to continue operations. We are not in that position right now because we do have that healthy fund balance.
You should note if it does expand into the fall, then Masico for sure, because Masico does not have the ability to short-term borrow. And what they will end up having to do is execute similarly to what we did last time, which is they will have to go to the 7-member districts for cash flow.
Yeah.
So,
creates all sorts of downstream impacts. And all because education isn't deemed critical, right?
According to their criteria.
Right.
I hope that we don't have to have the further conversation. I hope the government does. It seems like they've made, I think they've actually have gotten 5 bills to the desk. The governor signed almost all of those, I think, over the weekend. I think that they're past the 50% mark. There's about 14 spending bills, if I'm not mistaken. And I think they're making progress. They've had some good considerable hurdles that they've gotten over. Public safety was a big one. But the K-12 budget has been agreed upon. Parameters are set. In fact, it's very good for us. 2.45% on the funding formula in the first year, 2% in the second year. I haven't seen that in my time. There's a lot of other smaller areas that really don't affect Delano that much. The funding formula is a big thing that we've always said impacts all districts equally. So, but you just know we have a contingency plan. We'll be able to continue.
Next item then on the agenda, or any questions, I guess, before we move on. All right, next item then is opening for the 21-22 school year. I know you sent out an email on that, a couple weeks ago, clarifying the district's position on where we're standing in the fall. Sounds like there's been some questions out in the community about it, so hopefully that email set things straight. But is there other things that we wanted to talk about or have questions about? Or something else that we need to add?
It was a request to place it on the
Okay.
work session list.
Well, I mean, the elephant in the room is the double-digit percentage of people that stayed home last year because of the policies that we had to put in place, period, right? And I think those people are queued up waiting for us to get real crystal clear on what our school opening is. You sent out a note, it was a good note. I think, it just blows me away that high school sports are a month and a half away, right? So they're gonna make their decision in July if we're not crystal clear on the fact that we're gonna get as normal as our leadership, air quotes, will let us get, right?
Right. Yeah, I had a great conversation with a parent today, actually. Just had a few clarifying questions to the same point, and this person asked a great question and says, it's interesting because does anybody else wonder, they have to understand that districts, the timing is critical, right? The timing is absolutely, they can't just let us know the day before fall sports starts. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
We can't turn around depending on what it is. And I share that same concern. The difficulty is it's a balanced approach, right? Throughout this whole entire pandemic, you've gotten, I think, experts trying to make expert opinions based on information that changes on a weekly basis. So what works one week might not work the next week. And I think that the Department of Health, and now again, this is just purely Matt Shane's opinion, is that they don't want to fire out something in guidance and then half a month down the road have to rescind it and have different guidance based on one way or the other. I think they want to be sure that this is the way it's going to be. 2 weeks ago, I'm more optimistic than I was 2 weeks ago, than a month ago for sure, that the intent is. But you're right, the proverbial powers to be, if they leave that up to Delano, we're going to get back to as normal of the conditions that we possibly can, because that's how we best educate our kids. And that would be the ultimate goal for the district.
Makes sense. Have we heard, are we still, I guess maybe this is for Mary, like, do we know anything else about some of those other families? Are we still hearing that there are some that are, we don't know what they're gonna do? Good.
I think the main theme for most of the families that homeschooled their children this past year was, if I don't have to social distance, if I don't have to mask, we're back all in. As soon as that's the case, we're all in. And we're planning for that.
Okay. Good, thanks. All right, the next item on the agenda is graduation and the role of board members. I had an offline conversation with Jenny Rose now about this year. About this year in particular, we had some nuances with Barry being new to graduation and all the rules and regulations he was trying to follow, was trying to figure out how that was going to look. Came up in some of those conversations that admin has never really been a big fan of our past precedent of board members giving their kids diplomas. Jenny was asked, or actually kind of told right this year, that we could accommodate that this year. She was understanding, and so I committed to making sure that we had a discussion with that, give Barry a chance to kind of come in and talk about, but Barry and Matt to come in and talk a little bit about that from their perspective, and just have a discussion and move forward from there. So I don't know if you want, I mean, Barry, you want to just kind of say a few words about some of the.
Sure, I mean, obviously this year, because of the pandemic.
We'll probably need to get the mic.
Obviously, this year with the pandemic guidelines and things like that, we wanted to very much limit the stage presence. A lot of things were different, as kind of normal as the ceremony was. You know, we didn't have the American Legion present the flag at graduation. And so we obviously just, when the guidelines were lifted, carried everything over as much as possible, given the short notice. But that being said, moving forward, it is not my expectation that anybody other than the school board chair would deliver diplomas to students. I don't think that's necessarily a good practice. In fact, you might have seen it at graduation. There was I believe an aunt actually that pushed her student across the stage or whatever. That was not my intent either. That is not going to happen again. I believe that the ceremony should be reserved as traditional, with the school board chair and then the superintendent on stage, and then me at the bottom of the stage shaking their hands. So that's my expectation moving forward.
So so are you trying to get, you're worried about the disruption, you're worried about the focus. Are you trying to get this to be as focused on the graduates as you possibly can?
Yes.
Is that the idea? So do you think those graduates really honestly have any idea who we are individually?
Probably not.
Right, I would
No.
agree with that. So I guess I'm just wondering, and I checked with MSBA, there's no reason for the board to be involved at all. Why don't, it's my understanding also that the senior class picks stuff, right? They pick their speakers, their class speakers for looking forward and looking back.
No, there's a selection of staff. A staff committee actually picks the graduation speakers.
Okay, and then on a normal year, they would have a teacher give a presentation or a talk, right?
Yep, that's happened historically as well. This year, again, we weren't expecting any staff to be present. So, but even still, it's been my understanding and talking with Mr. Shane and other staff members too, that it's actually been very difficult to try to get a staff member to speak at graduation. But historically, yes, they have kind of requested that a specific person give a speech at graduation, which is actually why this year was a little bit different. The intention was not to have the faculty speaker, but then it was requested that Marie Thomas kind of do the closing remarks or say something. So we kind of finagled the script a little bit that way.
I guess I just don't understand why the board plays any role at all. You do that thing where you call out our name and that's great. I always love to get recognition, but not in that setting, right? I would just assume the board is eliminated from graduation completely. We don't need chairs on the floor. The board chair does not need to hand out the diplomas. I don't know why you wouldn't have the person handing out the diplomas that is much more meaningful to the kids, right? A favorite teacher that they vote on, or the teacher of the year that is voted on, or a rotation through the assistant principals who work with them every single day, Mr. Schauberger, who sees them every single day. Something that's much more meaningful. I guess if we're trying to get the board off the stage and get the ceremony focused on the kids and their memory, why don't we just get rid of the board altogether? Why stop at just the diploma piece?
Yeah, we could certainly do that too. Obviously this year being new and the guidelines in my first year, just trying to kind of adapt what's been tradition to the new guidelines and things like that. But I don't have a problem with that plan. Actually.
Yeah,
I was gonna say,
that's one person's opinion. I would strongly, I just have a huge problem with that. I
It's not
think,
required.
no, I get that, Corey, but there is a sense of tradition in this community, a sense of inclusion, a sense of ceremony, right? If we're gonna open up that, let's talk about not having it on the first weekend of June.
Sure, that's
Okay.
fine. I mean, it sounds
So,
like it's
but I'm
all
just
open to
saying,
discussion.
Like, I think as a board, one of the most important things we do is set policies and guidance that graduate students. So us not having a presence at that ceremony feels like a miss to me. I don't think we need to be promenaded. We don't need to be the center of attention. But I did like how we had made some changes where we sat with the staff, which I hope that is going forward. The teachers and staff will be back at graduation. I think that was an unfortunate miss that I have gotten a lot of feedback on from both teachers and parents that thought if any year we should have all stood up and given them a standing ovation for the heavy lifting, but I'll put that aside. I think they're having the board have a presence there just solidifies us within the community, within the parents, that we are looking out for their students. And I think that does play a role.
Well-
Having been a board member for 13 years and have been afforded the opportunity to give my children and quite honestly, nieces, whatever, that was different because I was chair, that was very special to me. I know that there's a lot of staff that would also like to have that opportunity. Barry's not going to like this to me. How do we become more inclusive then less inclusive? How can we give them and staff, whoever, more of an opportunity to play a part in that? Because it does take a village. It takes a community. It takes all the teachers and the staff. I think it's creative, like you said. Why does it have to be the board chair? Great, but maybe the board, or if you are a board member or a district staff member, you can play a different role within the ceremony. It doesn't have to make it a 3-hour ceremony. I think we can be efficient and unique, but I would just really caution ourselves to be more inclusive than strip out things that I think are tradition and ceremony. That's my.
So by the way, 2 weeks ago, I completely agreed with that sentiment. I kind of looked at it as a more the merrier thing, but it was explained to me that why should the board members get special
Sure.
treatment at that thing? If we're gonna seat board members, why not seat coaches? Some of these kids spend unbelievable amount of hours with their coaches, right?
Sure.
Just as an example. So I guess I would like the board not to say we're gonna or we're not gonna. I would like to decide on what the goal is and what we are gonna include or aren't gonna include. Because this is a pretty significant change for some of us. And the tradition has been board chair on the stage. The tradition has been parent of the graduate hands out the diploma. I don't care what we do there, but we should have a discussion on it. We shouldn't just be told what we're gonna do or what we're not gonna do. Just
That I
because we have a new principal in the chair.
I think, quite honestly, it's disappointing that that was taken away from Jenny without us having a discussion about it.
Completely.
And I don't.
I am
and that-
100% in agreement.
That cannot, I don't think that has to happen again. That is not us being a high functioning board, which is also why I think we need to do a retreat. I think we need to talk about, like, how are we functioning as a board in terms of transparency of communication, interacting with each other, and this was the cherry on top.
I'll own that. I apologize to Jenny. I'll own that. It came up very late in the discussion. I'm not gonna go into all the nuances of why it happened, but yes, we should have had a discussion. We just, at the time, by the time I think I realized that there was a miss there, on both sides, then it was too late to do anything, and so it was kind of, but anyway, I agree, we missed, so we're trying to have the discussion now and fix it going forward and figure out what the plan is.
And believe me, I'm trying to take emotion out of it. I've been on the board, it'll be 14 years, and I have one kid left, and so you're gonna tell me I've given every single one of his relatives their diploma, and I'm not giving him his diploma next year? That sucks. And that's just me personally, but also, I'm a huge proponent, if there's a coach, if there's a staff member, I don't care if you're in the elementary, intermediate, you're not a teacher, whatever, if your child is graduating, let's figure out how to make that a different special occasion, if that parent wants to. Not everybody wants to, so. anyway.
Because the one thing I would say, very thankful that we had graduation.
Yes.
It is amazing that we got to be there. Our kids got to be there. We got to be a part of it. And I completely understand that we're in the midst of a pandemic. And so we had to strip some things away. I will tell you, as having a child who walked through this year, it was lacking emotion. It was very like, we're gonna go, we're gonna do this, we're gonna get it done. I felt like we stripped away all of those things that it was like, oh, there were so many things that I feel like we missed. We took some of the emotion away that should have been there. And I don't want to get to the point where we strip it, that it's just a very cut and dried ceremony. We're just gonna do the act because we have to, and that's what we do. Like, you want to walk away feeling like that was awesome. And there were pieces of it that were amazing. Marie's speech was amazing, the students, but I do feel like some of those other things that were taken away took away the emotion that I expected as part of that ceremony, and our kids expected as part of that ceremony. And I just want to be cautious of that. I want to be cautious that we're not taking away the touchy-feely. I'm a touchy-feely person, so I'm probably looking for that. But I do feel like it was a little too stripped down. Just my opinion.
And
Well,
I
You
would
you
just,
have, you have to remember, I'm sorry. to
No, go ahead,
interrupt,
Matt.
but You have to remember, we were literally within weeks of things changing.
100%.
So-
And that's why I say, I know we're in the midst of a pandemic.
Right.
I just want to make sure that that wasn't setting a new precedent, and I'm beyond thankful that we had anything. And I think a lot of it was because, like, we couldn't have the choir, we couldn't have the band. We had to be very separate. So then our staff wasn't allowed to be there. And I get all of that. I just want to make sure that going forward, that's not the new, right?
Yeah, I think those are very good points to make. And I think to Corey's point earlier, we certainly have an opportunity to rethink traditions and kind of get the emotion, the feeling back into it. I think with respect to the specific question at hand, I'm going to request or basically continue that every graduate that crosses the stage at least is treated consistently. Just kind of like at the beginning, we asked that nobody cheer after each graduate's name is read because, some families will cheer and kind of go nuts and crazy and then others don't. And, it kind of creates this inequity, if you will. That seems to be an area of concern for the board, which I think is rightfully so. And so I think we just need a consistent approach for the graduates that cross the stage to keep the focus. With that said, the board's role in the ceremony is certainly up for conversation.
And that's what I was gonna comment on. The board confers a diploma. So for the board not to be present or a part of that ceremony would seem like we're skipping out on the most important part of our job. Right? It's the one thing you look forward to. You go to the graduation ceremony at the end of the year, you see those kids come through. You see really what the product is of all of our work throughout the year. And it's the board conferring the diploma. It's not a coach conferring the diploma. It's not your parent. It is the board says you made it. And I went to Watertown and honestly, all the board members handed out diplomas. They just kind of alternated through. It wasn't the board chair. And I don't see the problem. It's never been an issue. I don't think even the kids in the stands notice when the person conferring the diploma changes to the kid's mom unless they know who it is. They're pretty focused on walking across the stage, not falling, getting down, getting back to their seat.
Yeah, I would agree this topic needs further discussion because it is an emotional, sentimental event for a lot of parents and families. And I personally also heard a lot of feedback. So I think we obviously have room for improvement. So it's good that we're going to have the conversation.
All right, so this will not be the last, I'm sure, but since we've got a little time before the next graduation, so on Thursday work session it again, a couple more times if we need to. Perfect. Sounds good. All right.
Thank you for coming and being a part of the conversation, Barry. Appreciate it.
Next item is the Wright County MOU regarding transportation. Mary Reader is going to talk about that.
Foster care transportation agreement in place as part of our Title I allocation as well. Hennepin County for their portion, if they take the foster student in our school district, they take care of the transportation. So it's not, we don't have to. So Wright County, we have an agreement where we share that cost. So if they place a living outside of our school district and wants to be transportation. So we've done this for the last 4 years.
Okay.
Mary, how does that different from some of the Masico transportation pieces?
Those are special treatment, and we just have to do it no matter what. If we place stairs, then we have to transport.
Okay, all right.
All right, so we've got a hefty list of committee updates to go through tonight, starting with the referendum committee. I guess the biggest update here is that we're meeting tomorrow night to go through and try to get some consensus on a potential special meeting in July, right? For to try to determine the amount of the levy renewal that we plan to go for in November. So a couple weeks ago, just to try to facilitate the discussion, I put a few notes down, asked not to send it out. I think you all got it 2 weeks ago. I haven't heard from anybody, but that's kind of setting up the discussion for tomorrow night. But it's all up for discussion, all up for debate, which is an attempt to try to frame some of the discussion and get people thinking about where we needed to land tomorrow night. So that's the plan for that meeting.
Did we decide we're going to be in person?
We are not going to be in person.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't hear from everyone, and actually we had one board member who said that she couldn't, so as long as it has to be kind of
Yep,
all or nothing, so.
Great.
yep.
Okay.
So we're just gonna stick with the plan and do Zoom. Any questions or anything else from a committee standpoint that you would want to add? I know we're gonna be doing our heavy lifting tomorrow night, but Rachel or Jim, anything else?
I mean, I could go on for an hour on this here, but we might as well. wait
Well,
for
that's
tomorrow.
probably what for tomorrow. I think,
Yes.
the
I mean,
fact,
I almost feel like if we've decided we should wait till next year, then we don't need the meeting till tomorrow. You know, like, I feel like there's almost, I don't know, I'm just feeling like the vote's going the other way, that we should wait for next year, but because if we're not gonna move forward with asking for enough money, then just the renewal is pointless.
so we have an agenda item tonight to approve whether we're going this year or not.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll decide that tonight.
Okay.
And then we can go from there.
Sure.
And I guess as of 2 weeks ago, we had consensus on that. So I'm expecting that will carry tonight unless something has changed.
It
So-
was a sleep on it, think about it. And Rachel's point of why would we just renew and still be in favor of making cuts? So if
That's a
we're-
different question though, right? From the timing,
Yep, that's a different question. That's the question for tomorrow night.
right? So
Pending
the
tonight's
timing is what
results.
we're deciding tonight. There's a motion on the agenda tonight to confirm the timing so that we can all get consensus that we're gonna move forward this year. Once we get consensus on moving forward this year, then the next question is,
Sure.
how much are we gonna ask for? And that's what we're gonna talk about tomorrow night.
My point being, if we're not gonna ask for enough, then there's no point in time. If we're not gonna, if the question on the ballot isn't proper, then we don't need to move forward. I guess that's.
Yeah, that kind
I'm
of seems out of
I'm going
sequence a little bit.
backwards, right? But
I think it
I
could
think
go
I
either way,
disagree, but
right? I
yeah.
think it could go either way, and one of them has to, I think part of having two different items to decide on was separating the issue from like, is there a timing issue or is it a not issue?
Right, and if we decide tomorrow night that whatever we decide tomorrow makes it feel like we shouldn't go forward, then we can do that too, right? So I think all options are on the table at this point, but
yeah,
Should we make an adjustment to the agenda tonight and take it off of tonight's agenda and discuss it in tandem tomorrow?
I would prefer to keep it on the agenda tonight.
Why?
Because we have one board member who is opposed to that and she'd like her opportunity to do that in a vote.
Having them separate, Corey, allows those who are opposed to timing to still have a conversation about the amount.
I think Corey said that in tandem, two motions tomorrow.
Right. Not connected, separate, but do it tomorrow in one meeting.
The only
Have the
problem
discussion.
tomorrow is we're not voting
We're
tomorrow.
not voting tomorrow. The agenda for tomorrow is already established. We can't change it at this point.
Yeah, you
We can-
can.
We
You-
can't,
You
no.
can't change it. You're inside of 72 hours.
Tonight, we can change it though.
No, not for tomorrow.
This agenda said is my
Right, and you're
understanding.
asking two separate questions. We can't change the agenda.
You can amend this agenda tonight.
You've approved the agenda. You can agree to not take action on an action item or table it. You can do that. But to the first question, to move it to tomorrow as an action item, you cannot do. You'd have to have another special meeting.
Right, we'd have to move our meeting to Thursday or something like that.
Correct.
Friday.
And Friday,
Friday.
it's 3 days.
So we can do that if we wanted to.
Yes, you could table the motion. One thing I will say is I did ask Matt, because I was digging around for it. So if you saw in the shared folder, sorry, I don't know who closed that, but I'm just moving on. I did ask for the Hazel Reinhardt's demographer.
Demographics.
Thank you. Demographer, Hazel, her demographic study. And so that is what you saw that presentation get added to the shared document. I was curious about the enrollment projections. Now I feel really as an old board member, it's like we've already superseded the enrollment projections, which seems like they went on forever, but surprise, they ended like last year.
Right. Wow. It's
So,
time to do that.
but I thought it was interesting that there were some nuggets that you could extract from that, because I was very curious about what did these class sizes look like coming up and where the bubble was, and it did come true to, I mean, as much as we were like, is this fortune telling and is this truth? It really,
Right.
it played pretty close to what she predicted, so I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, the first half, it's a 10-year projection.
Right.
And it's a good study. I think districts need to continue to do these because it's important to make sure that we can forecast, and enrollment is a huge forecast for us. The second half of the study moved a little bit differently in the ranges, but, and then that makes sense. I mean, you only can go so, I mean, going the year 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 are going to get a little fuzzier anyways, just because things change, demographics change, things like that. So, but you're right, I think it was the first 5, 6 years, Hazel was spot on. And we were trending on that high migration, between high migration, high kindergarten, and low migration in high kindergarten, I believe is the range. There's 4 ranges in there of that. And we were trending pretty consistently. Last 3 years, it backed into the low kindergarten, low migration.
Okay, so I expect that we'll have some pretty healthy dialogue tonight on all this stuff, and that's a good point to remind us of some of that data that we used back then, so thanks for bringing
Mary,
that
are
up.
you going to be a part of that meeting tomorrow? Okay. I did have some specific questions about some of the spreadsheets, but I'll reserve that for tomorrow, just trying to map back some of the dollar amounts coming in. It seems like we got more money from the tax base. So I was trying to trace that back to the revenue per pupil versus expenses per pupil, and I was having a hard time, but I'm hoping you can educate all of us instead of just me individually. So that's why I didn't ask you prior, but that was one thing I was kind of curious about. Thank you. No, I know you will. So.
All right, Buildings and Grounds Committee, we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago. With me and Jenny and Corey, right?
Yes, I wasn't there.
Yes, that's right, you were unable to go. So we had part of the meeting over Zoom where we kind of talked a little bit about Matt LeBeau walked through some projects that are going on around the area. I actually have a hard copy that I have a bunch of notes on, but we could get it out to you if you're interested in looking at it. It's pretty typical type stuff, right? That happens that he's doing LED lights in the parking lot, sanding the gyms, new rigging in the high school auditorium, you know, just kind of pecking away at some of that kind of stuff. As well as kind of called out what of some of our long-term facilities maintenance projects, parking lots, roofs, some of that kind of stuff, just for a heads up. So we walked through all of that. We also talked a little bit, just briefly, about a conversation that's happening between the city and DEHA around some additional ice areas next to the DASA building. That conversation will be continued at a city school meeting that's happening on June 13th. We'll keep you guys updated on what's going on there. And then I got a little July 13th. And then Jenny wasn't able to make it in person, but I was there in person. And so Matt drove me around and just kind of looked at the space next to DASA. And we drove around and looked at some of the landscaping issues that still continue to be sort of an issue at the intermediate school, and so trying to get through all that stuff. But
So I consistently still get feedback on that natural grass space.
yeah, so does Matt.
Are we giving up the ghost and going with sod, or are we gonna continue to try?
We're gonna try to replant it again this
Yeah,
year.
it's a 3-year process. They've reseeded, I believe, twice. So it's basically it's a process that takes a little bit of time to, the combination of getting rid of the noxious weeds that tend to grow there and the natural grass per city guidelines in the planned unit development when we redid the whole campus. And that's going to take some time.
Is there a reason that that specific location was chosen to be the home of the natural grass versus, you know, the strip behind the intermediate along the hill? Like, that's all nice landscaped for the benefit of really no one, but yet it just seems a little odd and out of place. So just curious as to where that decision came from.
That was negotiations between the principal architect and the city on what they required. I know that from memory, we had serious runoff issues because it's a pretty steep hill.
Okay.
So there were some requirements with regards to what vegetation would be where. And in addition to, the drainage of storm sewer runoffs and things like that.
Okay. Then the only other question I had is thinking about the roundabout. How will that work at the busiest times when people, I just think of when we had the no left turn and there was the stop signs and how, so I'm just trying to anticipate how that orchestrates in a roundabout.
So the county the nice thing about that, where the county was very supportive in putting the roundabout is, there's a couple of 2-3 different roundabouts close to schools in St. Michael Albertville that, based on their action research, and they've got videos out there, it's a huge improvement just with the smoothness of the running of the high volumes of traffic through there. And I've actually gone up there and watched, and it is amazing, especially during a peak time when there's high traffic. It's a good solution. It's a better solution than, for sure, the county was not in favor of keeping stop signs there.
Okay. And they didn't want to just do a light that is only active during school hours kind of a thing.
I asked about, could we just put up stop signs during the high volume area? And they're not in favor of doing anything like that, just because it sends a very mixed message. People then, what do you mean? There is a stop sign, there isn't a stop sign, and it's not consistent.
Okay. Are you anticipating no left turns?
I haven't spoken about this with my leadership team. Right now, there are no left turns. I mean, the signs are all gone. So I anticipate that we can get back to traffic as normal.
Okay.
With a higher percentage of kids that were on buses, get back on buses and go back to the way we were.
Okay,
Construction starts next week, correct? On the roundabout?
July 6th.
okay, just waiting until the 4th of July. That makes sense.
They're doing utility work.
Yeah.
Relocates right now, but they're not going to close the signs just got put up. They're going to close that intersection on July 6th.
Is there intention to have it done by school?
Yes.
Wow.
They said 4 to 6 weeks to do a roundabout, I guess.
Good deal.
Probably won't be ready in time for activities to start. All right, admin committee. We met a couple times, I think, in the past month. We reviewed Matt's professional goals. He put this in his Friday email a couple weeks ago, so you guys are already aware of that. And Matt met all but one of his goals. The one he did not was related to district QComp. A big part of the discussion, however, the last time we met was we're proposing as a committee that we make a slight change, enhancement to the overall process that we use for Matt's evaluation. As you guys all know that for as long as I can remember, the process has been a rubric that's based on Matt's kind of duties as a superintendent. And we use the does not meet, meets, exceeds sort of rubrics to go through that. And it's been kind of the same, for a long time, which I think does a really good job of helping Matt understand how well he's doing in terms of the job responsibilities for his role. What's been missing, I think, and we talked as a committee and we agreed that what's probably missing is maybe a little bit more of the how he does his job, not just the what. So we talked about introducing this concept of giving him some evaluation on a set of like leadership dimensions. And we came up with 6, which are communication, relationship building, strategic awareness, motivation/teamwork, change management, problem solving, and decision making. And we're going to ask the board members as part of the process of doing the rubric that we've always done to add this component to it, and giving Matt identifying 2 strengths and 1 opportunity of those lists with some examples of where he does that well, where he might have something to work on for the next year. And we'll talk about that in addition to what we've talked about with the other stuff at the end of the July meeting, when we go into closed session to go through that. So just watch for that. Since we'd like to do that in the July timeframe, probably send something out in the next couple of days to give you guys a chance to get it filled out and get your examples in there and stuff so we can talk about it. The intent of it is to really give Matt an area of focus in terms of kind of leadership dimensions for the next year as part of this process. Is that fair? Committee, did I summarize that?
Yeah, that's right.
In addition, Matt will be doing the
Yes, thank you for that reminder, yes.
the completion of both components as a self-eval too.
Yeah, we're gonna-
And is that component open up to, in the past, we've had staff and I think just staff, not
He's
community
already
members.
done that.
Oh, he's already done that?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, so that portion of has already been completed, it wrapped up in the May timeframe. And so we gave him kind of the summary of what that looked like as well. I can summarize that to you guys as well.
Yeah.
We reviewed it with him as an admin, but we could play that back as well.
And the leadership dimensions kind of key off of what they talked to us. So it kind of, it's not 360, but it's.
So anyway, we just want to make sure you guys had a chance to kind of understand the context before we sent it out and asked you to do it. So I think, anything you want to add, Matt?
No, I just think historically, I mean, this process has evolved and has gotten better every year. I've been very appreciative. I want to make sure that it's still steeped in my professional growth so I can serve the board and serve the district in my capacity better every year. And this, if you remember that when I first became superintendent, we just started the evaluation tool. There was nothing before that. And now it's turned into an even more robust process over the year. I think the listening session with my leadership team has been invaluable feedback for me. I think that the board discussion and going into closed session and you having the opportunity, all 7 of you discussing the work of the superintendent and within this new kind of converse, we'll be able to solidify. So when you do give me that feedback as a board, it's good professional growth for me. So I'm just appreciative of your willingness to continue to work on the process for my growth.
Awesome. So that's the last of the committee updates. Are there any committees that we missed that aren't on the agenda already tonight? I don't think so. Board retreat. I'll put this under other. Amy approached me and I know she talked about Matt. We want to talk about dates. I think it's a great idea. We haven't done one in a couple of years. We could talk about whether we want it facilitated. I think the last time we did one, we had it facilitated. We could do more of an open-ended one. I agree. We've got a new board member. Since I'm still relatively new at the board chair role, I think we all could use a chance to kind of go through and.
Maybe we should do a doodle to throw out some dates.
We've typically done that in August.
Yeah, August. I think one year we maybe even did it in like September.
It was like
Oh,
September,
It felt
October.
fallish.
I mean, I'm
Not
open to
July
trying-
is my point, just because people are gone, right?
No, not July. Yeah, August. I think August would be the earliest. We gotta get through referendum stuff, I think, in August.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But we could also do double duty, right? To kind of carve out some or have that be an element of the retreat.
Sure.
To frame out the educational
The education
component. I think
yeah.
we've done that in the past. We incorporated that.
Sure.
I think it works to have it facilitated, but I think it puts a lot of pressure on Matt then, or you. So I think that's the main piece, whether we would, remember how we've had it facilitated in the past, and then we've done it on our own in the past.
I feel like, and I would like you to correct me if you think I'm off base.
Oh, I'll correct.
Is that a question?
The time we had it facilitated, we were like in the ditch, and I feel like this time we need a tune-up.
I don't think we were in the ditch, but I think we just didn't know how to do a retreat. And we wanted to be really good
So
at
maybe
it
we
because
don't need a
we're really
facilitator.
hardcore like that. Well, I don't know.
What do you guys
Yeah,
think?
we can discuss it.
I think a facilitator is easier to not have someone be responsible for that.
I agree.
role,
I
and
think
so
it's
that there's
nice.
somebody's wearing 2 hats if you don't have a facilitator. That's my only feedback.
I think it's nice to have someone who's just completely separate, be able to kind of lead you through discussion.
Yeah.
But
Puts a
I
lot of
also don't
pressure
know
on
the
you,
cost
Lisa.
of facilitator.
Well, and I, to be honest, I would probably ask Matt to facilitate it because I would need, I want to, I mean, I want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Right.
I have facilitated them in the past, and we've also had, if you remember, Jim Bout came
Yep.
in and did some prep work. And I think that was for different reasons.
Yeah.
But I can reach out to Jim, and if he's, he's a retired superintendent, so he's,
At least see what he costs. Like, do you remember what the cost was?
I feel like it was a
I-
couple $1,000s.
I'd
Isn't
have
it?
to look back. I don't know.
All right, well, I think consensus is that we would like to have one. I think we might, maybe we can doodle, to try to figure out a date and then I think we could probably do it without one, to be honest, as long as Matt's willing to help with the facilitation. And maybe even we could ask Paul to help a little bit, right, depending on what we do there. But I don't know. Sorry.
Paul looks excited.
What did I just get signed up for?
Sure, let's agree. Paul's going to
Yeah.
facilitate the board retreat.
What are your favorite snack?
Well, we only have 2 minutes before we gotta start the regular meeting. So I think we need to probably call for a motion for recess for now, and then we'll pick this one up later. But yes, I agree. I think well,
Motion for recess.
Jenny, I'll second.
I heard you. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?